and thank you for having me with you today. Joaquin asked me to deliver the presentation in English, so you're going to suffer it for the whole morning. But in any case, it's a real pleasure to be here. Let me introduce myself a little bit. I am Rafael Fernández Quirós. I have been working with the Coca Cola company for 29 years now. Child labor was not an issue at the time when I was hired. So I've had the chance and the privilege to work in Spain for 10 years, then moved to Atlanta, Latin America, basically Mexico and Costa Rica, and now I'm based in London, where I manage the function for what we call the Western Europe group, which is basically all Western Europe, starting in Scandinavia and finishing in Iberia. So all the countries in the Atlantic coast of Europe are under my responsibility in what we call public affairs, communications, and sustainability, which has been a new addition to the function. Joaquin asked me to talk about the challenges, the environment in which food and beverage companies have to deal today to deliver their messages, to communicate with the different audiences that they have to deal with. The environment is very, very peculiar in these times, and we are all witnessing a lot of changes that are going on in every sense. For instance, the media outlets, as you well know, are being under a lot of pressure because of the new social networks and the new ways of communication. So that means that journalism, and it's sad to say it, has decreased its level of quality, and it's not as professional as it used to be, because it has to compete in real time with many other media outlets, including the new social networks such as Twitter or Instagram and so on. So that's one thing. The media have changed. Another thing that is important to take into account is the reputation and the trust that the different institutions and entities have among the general population. Edelman Barometer, which is a reputation tracker that publishes its figures every year, basically is talking about politicians at the very low end of reputation, companies and corporations not that far away, but everybody is suffering, including NGOs, which so far have been the top of the rank. They are now going down because of scandals such as the one of Oxfam and several others that have been quite public recently. In terms also of multilateral institutions, there is a clear politicization of many of those multilateral institutions. So, as you can see, a very strange environment, changing trends, fake news. Let's not forget fake news. There are some masters in fake news, as you all know, mainly in the political arena, but not only in the political arena. A lot of activist groups are very expert in managing news and putting them the way they need to be. But anyway, this is an environment that all companies, all corporations are facing today. What I wanted to share with you is basically how my company, my corporation, is dealing with this challenging new environment. Because I think that if you really see real examples, physical examples, and you put a name on the face, it will be probably more enriching than talking in general about macro trends and everything. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Coca Cola company, where we are now, and what are the challenges that we are facing and how we are trying to address those challenges. I recommend that anytime you have a question, just raise your hand. Let's make this as interactive as it can be, so we can all have a fruitful conversation. This is not about delivering information one way. Let's try to make it two ways, all right? So, the Coca Cola company. Some people don't know this, but the Coca Cola company is already 132 years old. Actually, May 8th, this year, it was our birthday, our 132nd birthday, and we started as a single product in a single package, and that way we made our life until the 50s of last century, in which we started to introduce new packages, some of them bigger, and new products such as Fanta and Sprite. Another thing that people don't really is aware is that the Coca Cola company nowadays worldwide has 500 different products, from dairy to juices to energy drinks to all kind of waters, flavored, not flavored. And this is relevant because this is part of the transformation that we as a corporation have embarked which is becoming a total beverage company. That's why the title I included was Coca Cola, a total beverage company. And that is so because if we want to be alive for another 132 years, we need to adjust ourselves to the demands of consumers, and that is key. If we are not consumer-centric, and you will see that in the first column over there, we won't be able to satisfy the consumers' needs, because consumers nowadays, what they want is specific products for specific occasions. It's not just two flavors of different products. They want something for breakfast, they want something for midday, they want something different for lunch, and so on. So if you are not able to provide with an offer, at least a choice, at least for them to make those decisions, it is very difficult that you will succeed. Coca-Cola is nowadays the biggest beverage company in the world. People think of us, of course, for the brand Coca-Cola, but let me tell you that also we are the biggest juice producer in the world, which people don't usually know, and also the biggest tea producer in the world. So there are many, many different categories that we are working in that probably people are not aware of, and that it is some of our obligation to communicate, because that's actually what we are going to be doing in the future. You have several of the categories there. Hydration, a good hydration example in Spain would be Aquarius. It would be one of our star products, and that was developed in Spain, by the way. Juice, dairy, plant, and some other information that people don't know is that we have 21 brands which are worth more than $1 billion, starting with Coke and Sprite, Jugos del Valle, you name it. We are talking about 20 channels going from hypermarkets to small shops, mom and pops as they call it, or in Mexico, changarros as they call them. We are in more than 200 markets, according to the latest count. It's 207, only 2 markets, 2 countries we are not officially in, which are North Korea and Cuba. And if things go the way they seem to be going, probably North Korea will be the next one to be joined. But the funny thing, or the interesting thing about this, is that our presence in all those countries is based on a network of independent bottlers. So usually, well, not usually, the company owns the brands and owns the formulas, the recipes, if you want, of the products we sell. And the bottlers locally produce, sell, and distribute those products. So what we have been doing for 132 years is go to a country, find a partner, usually a partner with a bottling operation, and set up a bottling contract with that partner to ensure that quality standards, that human rights, that all the things that we need to defend as a corporation are taken care of, and then we work together with them. I don't know what kind of partner we may find in North Korea, but we'll see about that. You can see the geographic diversity. North America is very important. Europe, Middle East, and Africa, very important. Those are the geographical groups that we have, 4 of them. And then that small slice, which is called BIG, that means Bottling Investment Group. There are a few bottlers in the world that are owned by the Coca-Cola company, and those belong to these little organizations that we call Bottling Investment Group. And in Europe, we've had a long story. Actually, next year, 2019, we will celebrate the first 100 years of Coca-Cola being produced in Europe. It was first produced in France, so we will be celebrating a nice anniversary next year. In Spain this year, we are talking about our 65th anniversary. You may have seen some of the commercials, TV commercials that have been showed on TV, and now there is a beautiful one in YouTube, which talks about not the company, but those who have been working with the company for those 65 years and some of their memories and so on. But anyway, Europe, it's an amazing market for us. It's a very profitable market, so that's very important. But it's a two-way relationship. So for instance, in terms of economic footprint, the soft drinks industry, that includes our competitors, let's be generous here, is providing the European Union with 185 billion, 185 mil millones de euros of economic footprint. That's really a big chunk of the food and beverage industry, and again, supporting 1.7 million jobs. Those calculations are direct and indirect jobs. According to the methodologies that are used usually, for every direct job that a food and beverage company generates, there are usually from 7 to 10 indirect jobs generated from suppliers, agencies, and so on. Taxes, not bad. 30 billion euros in taxes every year. That includes, of course, corporate and personal taxes and everything. And yes, I mean, as you can see, a very strong actor in the European food and beverage industry. UNESDA is the name of the European Soft Drinks and Water Association, and this is an economic impact study, socioeconomic impact study that was presented a couple of years ago. So I mentioned that we need to be consumer-centric if we want to succeed, and consumers are telling us that they want many, many more different things than those that we have been offering them up to now. So for instance, you probably may have seen this. Ades, in Spanish, is with S at the end. It's a plant-based beverage that we have launched last month, actually, in Spain, and has no added sugars, and it's in that nutrition and health category that is growing exponentially nowadays. Also, premiumization, and you will be a little bit surprised to see Cadbury Schweppes or Schweppes as our brand, but actually Spain is one of the few countries in the world in which in which Schweppes is not a Coca Cola brand, because when we acquired Cadbury Schweppes, the competition authorities didn't allow us to acquire Schweppes in Spain because of the big share that they have. They told that it would have been a dominant position for the company. So it was Mexico, Spain, and Germany where we don't own the brand, and several other small countries. But anyway, premiumization has to do with making every moment more special. And for that, you need to play with the communication, with the packaging, and even with the taste and flavor of the products you are selling. Digitizing the company, this is becoming critical. You probably know of this phenomenon that is affecting not just the food and drink industry, but all industries really, which is e-commerce. E-commerce means that Amazon is today our biggest customer worldwide. It used to be McDonald's, it used to be other kind of customers. Today it's Amazon. And that means that you need to have all the right products listed in the right customer to make sure that your consumers just call or send a message with their phone and can get the product they need. So that's an environment that is changing. Now living in London, the high streets are the biggest streets in which most of the big shops are operating. Many of those big shops are closing down because of the competition of online traders, of online companies. And that means that this is going a real change in the way and in the shape of a city such as London, which has been always a very commercial city, if you wish, right? And then environmental consciousness. Just let me tell you this. We do investigate, we do make research with consumers on a constant basis. Almost every day we're asking consumers about what they want, how they feel, what they would like, what is concerning for them. And we have found that the three key reputational drivers for our company, specifically for Coca Cola, are recyclability of our packages. So that shows you how much important the environmental conscious has become. The second one is local footprint. We have already talked a little bit about the contributions that companies do in terms of employment, taxes, and so on. And the third one is climate change and emissions. So the three most important reputational drivers for a beverage company in this case, two of them have to do with sustainability and environment. That's just for you to have in mind, because that's going to be defining the challenges that our industry is going to be facing. Just a little thought here. You probably have been aware of how much sugar has been demonized lately. The new wave of challenges is really packaging, and especially plastic. Let me tell you this, and remember my words. The next wave is going to be related to sourcing, ingredients, fair trade, organic, human rights, labor rights. That kind of stuff is the stuff that companies such as ours are going to be asked to be accountable for, not just for what we do, but also for what our suppliers do. That's the next wave. Remember those words, because you're going to live it. Anyway, the world is changing, and so are we. I told you that we are planning to become, we are working on becoming a total beverage company, but not only that, we are working also on trying to meet the consumer needs, not only in terms of the products that they want, but also in what they expect from a leading company such as ourselves. So that means that we are opening ourselves, we are becoming more transparent, and there are several initiatives in that sense that we are taking and that have to do directly with communication. So I will share them with you. Talking about those challenges, sugar. We have publicly agreed with WHO that no one should have more than 10% of their calorie intake from added sugars. That's official statement by the Coca Cola company. And we are working to have precisely the kind of portfolio that can allow a person to drink one of our products every time they want without reaching that percentage of added sugar. So that's one commitment that we are working on and that we are actually reaching. Just to give you an idea, because people are not usually aware of this, in Great Britain, brand Coca Cola, 52% of its sales is no-calorie Coca-Cola, so diet and Coca-Cola Zero. So that's more than half. In Spain, which is also a very strong country in terms of non-sugar portfolio, it is 35. 35 of Coca-Cola products, Coca-Cola branded products, have no sugar in Spain. So that's a change and a trend that we are fostering and that we are helping our consumers to be aware of so they can make the right choices. This doesn't mean that artificial sweeteners or sugar alternatives are not under attack. In fact, they are under attack. For instance, WHO is now not complaining about sugar itself only. Now they are complaining about sweetness. They say that sweet products need to lower down their sweetness because they are training consumers to have a sweet tooth, as the British say, so they prefer more sweet products. That's, of course, a little, again, biased because you are experts in this. Sugars are very important, even for the brain to work. Glucose is fundamental for the brain to operate, as important as oxygen. So, but anyway, that's where we are, so we need to face that. And the other thing has to do with packaging. We have made last November in Western Europe and last January in Davos a global commitment which is basically to recover 100% or the equivalent to 100% of the packages we put in the marketplace, that by 2025, and in 2030 to have all our plastic packages with at least 50% of recycled content. You may say, why 50%? Because there is not enough recycled plastic to make sure that we can reach a further target. Today, plastic is recycled basically mechanically. It's cut in very small flakes and it's washed and disinfected and so on until you can use it again to produce new plastic bottles. There are new technologies which are becoming almost industrial in the size that they are getting, which are recycling plastic chemically. So basically they decompose the whole thing and then they put it again, and that's going to be the next frontier in terms of plastic recycling, ensuring much more quantity and much more quality for the product. But anyway, that's work in progress. And of course, being a Coca-Cola presentation, I have to show you a video. We couldn't live without a video, being Coca-Cola. So if you allow me, I'm going to show you. Let me give you a little explanation before. I just mentioned the commitments that we are taking in terms of recovery and recycling, But there is another commitment, which is to use our own brands in delivering sustainability messages. That's a bit difficult because you know what brand Coca-Cola is like. It's about fun, it's about being with friends, it's about enjoying a cool drink. So how do you deliver a sustainability message that is basically educational? It's asking consumers to take care of their waste and to put it in the right recycling bin and so on. So this is an attempt that we have done. You can find it in YouTube. But again, it's quite challenging to try to do both things at the same time. In any case, let me show you.
Thanks for recycling that Coke.
A typical Coca-Cola ad, but at the same time with a recycling and sustainable message. Well, it's an attempt. We will get better at that. So let me go back to the presentation. It's very interesting because one of the requests or the demands by activist groups, for instance, Greenpeace, is for us to use the power of our brands to deliver these kind of messages. And it is really a challenge. So I was saying, it's like a big aircraft carrier that once you put it in route, it's very difficult to change course. So it takes a little time. He's trying hard to make things go a little faster. Speed is critical if we want to adapt to today's environment. So, how are we becoming more transparent and how are we trying to meet those societal demands, those consumer demands? To make it simple, we are talking about what we do inside the bottle and what we do outside the bottle. So inside the bottle, you've heard that, we are reducing sugar. Let me give you also an example, a local example. Since 2000 to 2018, sugar in Coca-Cola products made in Spain has been reduced by 38% per liter. And we have committed in Spain to reduce another 12% going to 2020. So we are talking about huge amounts of sugar that is being reduced in the products that we are selling. Evolving recipes, and this has to do with clear examples could be, for instance, Fanta Naranja, which is increasing its juice content and it's providing a more natural set of ingredients for consumers, all the different versions of Coca-Cola. You probably have seen Coca-Cola Vanilla, Coca-Cola Cherry, and all kind of different mixtures of sweeteners with it. And new and different drinks. I mentioned before Ades. In Spain, in 2 years' time, we have launched 6 brands. I don't know if you've seen Royal Bliss, which is a mixer for night clubs. That was introduced last year. We're introducing a smart water. We're introducing Ades as we speak, Honest Tea, organic tea, and several others. So it's been a big effort to open and widen the portfolio and the choice that we're offering to consumers. And at the same time, we need to make sure that some of the offers and decisions that we are making make sense in terms of our intention to support authorities and society in general to fight such a big problem as obesity. I mean, we don't want to hide away from obesity. We know it's a big problem, and we want to play a role in going against it. Having said this, calories from soft drinks are around 3% of the total calorie intake in Europe, in the Western Europe. So let's put things into perspective. But that doesn't mean that the sugar that we have in our products is not a contributor to obesity. So that's one of the reasons that we are acknowledging this. And besides reformulating our products, we are also selling them in smaller packages. We have introduced new cans, new smaller packages to help people control the portions, the size of their portions. Accessible information. You all have seen the GDAs, the guide daily amounts that are included in our packages. I didn't bring anyone. We are now supporting other 4 big companies, multinational companies, Unilever, Pepsi, Nestlé, and which is the other one? Oh, never mind. In Europe, to introduce color-coded GDAs. So that means that there will be a traffic light system, red, amber, and green, for the different ingredients to make even easier the decision to choose whatever you want to choose and have a good idea of their content in salt, in fat, or in sugar, which are the 3 riders of apocalypse in this moment. Accessible information is not just about the labeling, it's also about the way we are presenting our products with the secondary packages and the whole thing, and then no advertising targeted to children under 12. There will be times in which you will see a Coca Cola sign, of course, in the street, but according to international standards, an audience is not an infant audience where more than 35% of the audience is older than 12 years old. I think that if someone knows about food and about beverages, it's precisely the food and beverage industry, and that they should take part, at least as an advisor, in decisions made by the health authorities. But anyway, that's a very specific case, and Joaquin was kind enough to remind me of it. So these are some of the examples that I mentioned in general, and these are related to specific brands. So in the case of Sprite, sugar has been reduced by 30%. This is a European level. Since 2010, we now have 240 of those 500 products that I mentioned, which have no or low calories. We have reformulated 150 drinks, beverages, since 2010 too. And overall in Europe, not just brand Coke, overall of the portfolio, 34% has no sugar in it nowadays. So it's, as you can see, a big change. And we are trying to communicate it by traditional means, as in this case, paid media. This is part of the campaign developed in the United Kingdom to communicate what we were doing. And yes, another challenge, which is actually make people know, and not just people, the society in general, but also authorities and stakeholders and activist groups and academia and so on, what we are doing. This is one of the challenges in terms of communication that any company today are facing in one way or another. These are UNESDA, the European Soft Drinks Association infographics, which are talking about also more or less the same things that we are doing as a company. A little lower in this case, but never mind. That means that the whole industry is committed. It's not just us. And that's also a result of the leadership role and the responsibility that we think that we need to display as being leaders in the beverage industry worldwide. So we are now creating a lot of new and different drinks. One of a research and development labs is in Brussels, and it is producing new drinks on a daily basis almost. It's incredible. And by the way, that's another sign of how we are trying to open ourselves to the society. If you would like to go to Brussels and you would like to visit our R&D lab, you just need to tell me. Joaquin will have my contact information. We are organizing visits for the stakeholders, in this case, students as yourself in a master related to food technology are, of course, a key stakeholder. So if you really decide that you want to go and visit, just let us know. We will open the doors of our R&D lab for you to visit. And there are several in the world. In the middle, you can see all the different centers of excellence that we are doing. But we are not just developing our own products, which is something that we like to do. We are also seeking for opportunities outside in the marketplace. So for instance, Zico was a coconut water brand that we acquired a couple of years ago, more than that, about 5 years ago in the States. Smart Water was a part of a company called Glaceau that we also acquired. Innocent, you may not be aware, but Innocent is part of the Coca Cola portfolio, smoothies and juices. Del Valle, we bought that in Mexico in 2006 and double its size by 2010. So yeah, very interesting new acquisitions. Honesty, which is one of the brands that we have introduced in Spain this summer. So that's another way for us to widen our portfolio and try to meet the consumer demand. Fuse Tea, that's an interesting thing. Fuse Tea is the Nestea version in the rest of Europe. Only Spain and Portugal have kept the Nestea brand because it has such a big brand value in this country that we are keeping it. But we have changed Nestea in the rest of Europe to Fuse Tea. Fuse Tea was presented in Zurich early this year in January, and it was a global launch that has been actually quite unparalleled before. It was introduced simultaneously in 35 countries, mostly European countries, but 35 countries simultaneously. That guy there is my boss, Brian Smith. Despite the name, he speaks perfect Spanish, so just for you to be aware. And I mentioned the Brussels R&D Center. We have actually a strong operation there. We have 100 innovation experts, and if I'm not wrong, they're from 35 or 36 countries. So it's a big center, not only of research and development, but I would say even from diversity in terms of thinking, background, nationalities, and so on. They are bringing out, as I mentioned, almost one innovation per day, 350 innovations per year, which is quite amazing for a food technology lab. And we are working with 2 billion consumers. EMEA, which is the big group in which Western Europe is included, includes 122 countries and basically a third of the population in the world, a little more than a third, or less than a third of the population in the world. And this center in Brussels is providing innovations for all of them. Responsible marketing. Marketing, as I said, is key to communicate the attributes, the intrinsics and the extrinsics of our products, but we don't want to do that in an indiscriminate manner. We think that parents and parents basically are the ones who should decide what their children eat and drink, and also what they should be seeing, especially if you go to schools. So one of the key decisions is you won't find Coca-Cola products in any primary school, and you will only find Coca-Cola products without sugar in secondary schools. As part of our commitments, we won't make any advertising, and we are not doing it, to children below 12, not through electronic means, not through the internet, not at all. Again, as I mentioned before, if you go to a stadium, you will see probably a Coca-Cola sign, because we have been linked to sports since the very beginning of the brand. And just to give you an idea, we were the first corporate sponsors of the Olympic Games, 1928, Amsterdam. No obesity problems at the time. And yes, for us, responsibility has to do not just with making sure that we don't market to children, but also in the way we market to everyone. That means not doing false claim in our advertising. That means not using the wrong media to communicate our products. And this is something that I personally would like to say. If you sometime, for whatever reason, find a piece of advertising or a TV channel which is showing a Coca-Cola commercial in an inadequate audience, please let us know. We have, as you know, a hotline that can be used, and also the CIC, the Consumer Interactive Center, and we take very seriously all claims that we are violating our own policies. We are not supposed to do that, and we won't allow it to happen. So please let us know. I was mentioning before the color-coded labeling. Well, the fact is that if a product doesn't have fat, doesn't have saturated sugar or salt, it's all going to be green. And it's surprisingly amazing how many green products do we have against other companies, such as, for instance, chocolate producers, as we said a while ago, or even dairy product companies. Smaller packs, we were talking about the introduction of smaller packs. According to a study by Deloitte, the two main ways to decrease sugar consumption, and this has been tested in a study that was worldwide, a meta-study that was made worldwide, are reformulation and smaller packages. Actually, taxes, which are now is something which is very fashionable, become in the very low end of the effective measures against sugar consumption. And basically because those taxes are mainly discriminatory. If you want to tax sugar, that's fine, but then you will have to tax all sugar products, right? Usually they don't tax all sugar products. They are very directed to specific categories in which soft drinks are probably one of the most affected. In any case, these have been introductions that have been happening, especially since last year. You will be able to see in Spain the 250 milliliter bottles, smaller than the average can, the average 33 can that we have been drinking for a long time. And this is a major change because it implies changes in all the production lines and distribution and so on. So this is relevant and a bigger statement for us as a company. Working with trade associations, UNESDA is, as I mentioned, Soft Drinks Europe, the one that covers the whole sector in Europe. Food Drink Europe is bigger, and it includes all food and drink producers, not just producers of soft drinks and other beverages of the kind. The World Federation of Advertisers, obviously we as advertisers have a word to say too when there are laws regulating communications, TV ads, and so on. And then the EU pledges. We try to work very close with EU authorities for many reasons. First of all, because we are not concerned with regulation, we are concerned with poor regulation, with discriminatory regulation. So that's what we try to work when we get together with authorities. Going back to the taxes, we are not against taxes as a company. As a matter of fact, we understand that governments and treasuries all around the world need more income today if they want to address pensions, if they want to address social security, national health, and so on. So we are very happy to understand that taxes need to be raised in many cases. That's true. But then it has to be, or it should be, non-discriminatory. That is very interesting because there are companies that do not have commitments such as the one I have shared with you, like not marketing products to children below 12 years old. The pledge includes a lot of studies and data that has been gathered from all over Europe in order to make several requests from companies that companies are addressing in the best way possible. My point there is that it's not difficult to comply with the requests of the European Union because they are very reasonable in general. So any company that wants to actually have a healthy business in the European Union shouldn't have any problem meeting the request that the European Union is posting. Nowadays, we have an interesting, there are like three main regulations that are coming from the European Union that are affecting the industry, just for you to know. There is the audiovisual directive, which is being negotiated nowadays. There is the packaging strategy that was presented a couple of months ago, and it's going to affect all food and beverage packages in Europe. And then there is the dual quality. Have you heard of that one? Some products, depending on what they are produced, some products of the same brand use different ingredients. That's a normal practice, depending sometimes on the local suppliers, because you usually tend to take advantage or to use local suppliers because of your local footprint and everything. And sometimes because some companies want to make their products cheaper depending on where they produce them. So the European Union is working on a standardization of ingredients for all branded products throughout the European Union. Typically, you could find products especially in the Eastern European countries, with different ingredients than those used in the Western European countries, or less quantity of juice, for instance, in a drink. So that's something that the European Union is now working on. We are also supporting them very happily. But the thing is that sometimes we do, as companies, need to source what we buy in the countries where we operate. So for instance, in Mexico, we use sugarcane mostly because it's a huge sugarcane producers. in Spain or in Europe, we use beet sugar, azúcar de remolacha, because that is what we have here. Chemically, it's basically the same. I mean, it's the same formula, the same ingredient, but you have to adjust to those local supply constraints. So that's one of the things that the European Union is struggling with in order to develop the dual quality directive. But it's a very interesting legal environment. So what we are trying to do is, when it has to do with health, is to focus on interventions that work. I mentioned before that reformulation and smaller packages are interventions that, according to Deloitte, to a meta-study by Deloitte, are one of the most effective. We are also including here, for instance, the labeling, which can influence also, as we know, 18% of the people who read them, to take, and then of course the reformulation, as we mentioned before. All this information is externally sourced. We don't use usually internal information when we share presentations with external audiences, because we want to have the background and the solidity of the providers of the information. This is what we are supporting. This is where we are today. This was introduced about 10 years ago throughout Europe. It was a self-regulation initiative by the food industry, and this is what we are proposing today. Those are the companies that are behind it. So Unilever, Coca Cola, PepsiCo, Nestlé, Mondelez. And the point is precisely that, to be more transparent and to help consumers make more informed choices, to make more informed decisions. Again, there are some contradictions. So there are products that will have a lot of red, and there are others that will have no red at all, and you wouldn't expect that, but that's how it works. These are the principles in which the evolved nutrition labeling is based. First, building on what already works. Second, being inclusive and transparent. And first, and this is more important than anything else, is having consumer first. The key features of the evolved nutrition labeling. This has been under discussion as we speak. There are other companies and other countries that have come with similar solutions. For instance, France is introducing an alternative solution called Nutri-Score, which is also based on color-coded, but it's more complex to understand. So we are supporting this and showing it to those who are interested in it, which is to provide simple and easy to understand meaningful labeling information, adding colors to the numbers, and providing consumers with that accurate information that helps them make their choices. These are some findings, and these are findings that have been developed by UNESDA, which is out of 10 consumers find this labeling system easy to understand and helpful to access the nutrient content of food and beverages. Consumers prefer color labels over the current monochromatic white or gray scheme that we are using. And in general, consumers prefer the per portion labeling when it comes to comparing the nutrient content of different products using a color-coded system. You have all this information in more detail if you want to take a look at it. In the Evolved Nutrition Label, you have a website with all this information. And it's interesting because this is pretty much the trend that is going to be followed in Europe. And if it's followed in Europe, I can tell you it will be followed everywhere. Just think about GDPR, the privacy directive that was introduced a month ago. All American companies are now adjusting to it. They don't like it. And this is basically what I had for you today. In summary, some of the health and well-being efforts related to our strategy are a clear commitment to helping create a healthier food environment, reducing sugar, introducing new different drinks, new smaller packs, and marketing responsibly, information, and the new which we are introducing, or what we are supporting now in Europe. This is what I had for you today. I hope it was of interest for you all, and I'm very open to your questions today. pushback?
So in the U.S., as you know, obesity is a big issue in the United States. But I think a big problem in the U.S. is not necessarily Coca Cola or the soft drink companies. It's the fast food restaurants or food service because of the portion size and the pricing as well. I remember, if you go to a movie house in the U.S., you can order a popcorn and a soft drink. Normally, people order a popcorn and a soft drink. But the difference in the price between the small, medium, and large soft drink is very, very small. So they basically incentivize people, especially the poor people, to buy the larger portions. And when I talk about large portions, they're really big portions. And I think that contributes to more calories that are being consumed. And this is not true in movie houses, but also in fast food restaurants.
Absolutely. That's a real challenge that we are facing because we have a little problem because those sizes and those prices, we don't set the prices. It's the customer that sets the prices. And sometimes they use our products to bring people to whatever it is. For instance, it's very typical that big surfaces, the markets usually have offers on the soft drinks, mainly Coca Cola products, so they bring more people into the aisles, and those people end up buying more stuff. So it's a difficult balance trying to be fair with your customer, without being able to tell him how much he should be pricing the product, or even how big should the cups be.
I mean, we are not for big cups. We actually think that anything that goes beyond 400 milliliters, it shouldn't be called a single-serve product. That's not how the way we feel it. But you have to convince your customers about that. But anyway, they are seeing also that it's their reputation which is being affected, not just our reputation as producers. So they are becoming more and more interested in offering also smaller sizes. You will be seeing that cups in cinemas and in fast food are going to reduce its size dramatically going forward. And new no-calorie options are going to be introduced because usually, I mean, imagine you are a small shop in New York and you have a post-mix, which is small by definition because it's a small shop. You cannot have 7 faucets with different variants. So you get what is sold the most. In New York, it will be Red Coke and maybe Fanta or Diet Coke, but you won't have all the variants of low or no calorie products. That's something that we have been working on, and but that's a really good point. That's reality. But the thing is, and this is what when we talk about discrimination, is that even acknowledging that soft drinks are not the main contributor, are just a small part of the whole mix, the taxes are falling on soft drinks. They are not falling on the rest of the categories, and that's something that we don't think it's fair, and we have to make it clear.
Okay, if you have any question, we have some problem with the microphone. The only thing you have to do is try to speak a little bit higher. Any question? No? Yes.
You talked about the reduced sugar, and you were talking about normal Coca Cola or Coca Cola Diet or
Yes, we have. Yes.
That's a very good question. Original Coke is there because many people want it to be there, and it will be there. It's the same formula as it was 132 years ago. What we're talking about reducing sugar is introducing new versions of whatever product without sugar, or adjusting and reformulating some other products which can afford to be reformulated. For instance, Coke Zero and Coke Diet. If you see Coke Zero and Coke Diet, mostly you will see that now we are selling them with the same color, red color, but just with a little stripe to differentiate them. That's because, first of all, we want to use the power of marketing of Coca-Cola Red to support the non-sugar variants, and also because what we are saying is that you have original cola, but without sugar either, in the case of Zero. It's the original taste, but without sugar. So that's the message that we are delivering. But in some cases, like for instance, We are now launching, we have launched a Sprite in the Netherlands with no sugar at all. And there is no sugar variant for a Sprite in the Netherlands. That's a market test. Depending on how it works, we'll try it in different countries. And if it goes well, we'll probably have just Sprite with no sugar at all.
Okay, another question. When you reduce sugar, you have to keep the taste, right? So you have to put another chemicals like additives and first what do you do? You're saying taste.
Sweeteners. We have a blend of sweeteners. In the case of, for instance, Coca Cola Zero, which is aspartame, acesulfame K, and the other one is, I can't remember by heart. But you work with the sweeteners that are available. Sweeteners may have not a good reputation, but are the food ingredient that has been more tested of all food ingredients in the history of humanity. Aspartame has gone through more than 300 tests, just for you to tell you. So they are quite safe, and even PAHO or WHO will acknowledge that. The problem now is that they are talking about sweetness, so they want the sweetness to go down too. But sweetness in general is what we use. Now we have a stevia, as you know, from an origin, it's more natural if you want, coming from this plant from Paraguay, which is now produced in Brazil and China mainly. And that's a natural sweetener. And we are working in our R&D lab in new sugar alternatives, because the holy grail there, the holy grail will be to have a natural, non-caloric sweetener that tastes exactly like sugar. That so far doesn't exist, but we are working on that. We are working on that.
I have a question with about, I think right now a really fast increasing trend is organic products. Organic products, and as you know, you have a lot of information about the consumers. I want to know what is your knowledge about the perception of the consumers, the consumers, organic product consumers, are they consider healthier, they consider more sustainable, these organic products, and also to know what is the position of Coca Cola about developing new organic products.
Absolutely. Organic is becoming big, and there are countries in which it's already very, very big. In Germany, if it's not organic, you're out of the game. And so much so in places like Norway and Sweden too. Organic is key. Having said that, and you all know it, organic doesn't necessarily mean better taste, not necessarily, or doesn't mean that it has been produced under fair trade conditions or anything like that. It just means that it didn't have any pesticides or any kind of fertilizers used in its production. Having said this, we think it's an important trend, and again, being a consumer-centric company, what you need to do is to listen to the consumers. If consumers are asking for organic, we'll give them organic. Actually, honesty, which is the line of this, you don't see it there. Well, that's honest. That's an organic line of products. It started with tea. We're now introducing organic coffee, ready to drink, and organic chocolate, ready to drink. So we do have a line of organic, and we think that's a trend that we need to be aware of, and we need to address those consumers who actually want organic products. But organic is just the way the product was grown, not really talks about better taste or you know, or fair practices in terms of sourcing, producing, and so on.
One more. So when you're, how challenging is it when you're developing new sustainability initiatives? How challenging is it to persuade your supply chain partners and their independent partners to adopt those? Or do you have enough pull to do that?
We do have some strength in terms of dealing with suppliers and with our bottlers. With our bottlers, it's a matter of mutual trust. We ask them to behave the way the Coca Cola brand is supposed to behave. which is an inclusive, optimistic, and fair way of doing things. So with the modern we don't really have those problems. With suppliers, we've had some problems. Child labor. You go to Latin America, sugarcane production. There are children cutting the cane, and you cannot take them away. First of all, because their parents need them there, because otherwise they won't get the money to eat. And secondly, because where do you take them? And why would you take them? That should be the state rating. So what we try to do in those occasions is to make sure that there are alternatives for those cases, the specific cases that we find that are breaking our own principles, so the children can be put away, can study instead of being cutting the sugar cane. And we do have a supplier guiding principle that every supplier needs to sign whenever they start working with us, and we audit our suppliers on an annual basis. So we do that. Despite that, you will always find cases that we didn't have under control. The sugar industry is one of the most risky in terms of having problems with child labor, for instance. And especially when you get so big as we are, you can get in trouble because small farms providing, I don't know, peach or apples for our juice products may be run by family businesses, and those family businesses usually use children. So those are kind of things that we need to be on top of, but we can't do it on our own. So we always try to do it with the support of NGOs and local authorities in what we call the Golden Triangle. So it's the private sector, the civil society, represented by NGOs, and then the authorities. That's the only way getting the strength of the three parts together that you can address that kind of problems. In Mexico, for instance, Mexico has one of the highest rates of recycled plastic worldwide. The people who gather and collect the plastic are informal people, and they usually use children. So what do you do? I'm not buying that plastic because you use children. Then the children will be in a worse situation. But again, what we do when we find that is to call the authorities and to work together with NGOs to try to provide a solution for that not to happen.
Talking about plastic, I have seen last month in Facebook some videos about this new trend of a lot of bottles and plastic bags in the seas. And there are some new trends that they try to end with the plastic and finish with it. What's your opinion on that? I mean, do you think that in a lot of years we'll have plastic bottles or not?
Okay, let's go step by step. Plastic is fundamental, not just for packaging food and beverages, for airplanes, for cars. I mean, our life as we understand it today wouldn't be like it is without plastic. So I don't see plastic disappearing completely going to the future. Also, I don't buy the one-way plastic bottle idea, because what we think and what we are trying to do through many systems that we're working is to have that bottle go to the consumer and then go back to be used as a package again. So that's what we are trying to do. So it's not one way. I mean, there is a circular life cycle for plastic in that sense. I do think, though, that people are conscious about the fact that there is too much plastic elsewhere, and especially now in the oceans, and people are going to be reducing, even from a personal decision point of view, they're going to be reducing the plastic they use. And so are going to be many of the companies. We are now seeing supermarket chains that are forbidding all the plastic bags, and they're not just selling them to you, they're just giving you paper bags. We are now seeing supermarket chains that have committed to eliminate all food plastic envelopes before the year 2020. That's fine, that's a good tendency, and we have the right technology today to make sure that the products don't get rot and don't get wasted as they used to do before plastic existed. But I mean, you're experts in food technology. Without plastic, food would rotten at 10 times higher rate than it does today. So we're talking about keeping the food in good shape and being able to transport it and deliver it wherever it needs to be delivered. So yes, there will be a reduction in plastic. In business like ours, we have a very strong mix of refillable and reusable packaging. If you go to any bar in Spain, you will see the glass bottles. Those are refillable and reusable. So we don't use plastic in bars. Some customers may go to the hypermarket and buy them, but that's not the way to do it. And the recyclable, the refillable mix is around 35 to 38% in Spain and in countries such as Belgium and so on. So there's a lot of our package needs that is not plastic. And even in some cases, like in Germany, we have refillable PET and reusable PET. It's not that nice because after a couple of trips to the marketplace, you need to change it because it gets all scratched and all. It's not very attractive, but it's an effort to show commitment for reducing the plastic.
Okay. Any question? We can go for the coffee break, and 12 o'clock we come back for the presentation. I would like to thank Rafael really for the excellent presentation.